Hey, welcome back. In this video, I'm going to show you the components that make up a sub-D object and how to select these components in several different ways that are going to speed up your workflow and help you out. Okay, so let's look at that. First thing we need to do is create a cube. So let's go over here to Primitive, Polygon Mesh. We're going to grab ourselves a cube. Close this PPG, we don't need it. Okay, with the mouse cursor over this window, hit F12 on the keyboard to maximize the view. And I'm going to go over here and switch my shading options to shaded view and hit G on the keyboard to hide the grid. Okay, so here's a cube. Now what we're going to do is turn this one into a sub D, and then I'm going to show you how to work with this in terms of components. But before we get into that, I want to reveal a little secret to you. I've actually been lying to you this whole time. Yes, you got me red-handed. I've been lying to you this whole time. Well, what have I been lying to you about? Well, the truth is that in Xsi, you don't have to create this cube into a sub-D to be able to work with sub-Ds. In reality, the bright engineers at Softimage decided to make every polygon object in Xsi a sub-D object simultaneously. In other words, all polygon objects are sub-Ds at the same exact time. So you're probably wondering, how is that even possible? How can it be two things at once? Well, they made it possible. It's pretty simple. This cube is actually a sub-D, only right now it's at the lowest resolution level, level 0. That's why it looks only like a 6-sided, very simple primitive cube. But if I hit a few buttons here on my keyboard, I can see that it is a sub-D, and I could cycle up the resolution levels to a nice smooth version up to level 4. Now, how did I do that? Well, it's pretty simple. All you have to do is select the object, the polygon object that you want to go ahead and smooth out. Then use the plus and minus keys on the number pad of your keyboard. Now the minus key goes down the resolution levels down to level 0, which is the one that we're at right now. The plus key cycles up the resolution levels. You could go all the way to level 4 using the plus key on the number pad. Of course, you can override that and go higher than level 4 if you dig into the PPGs and override it manually, but there's really no reason to do that. This is smooth enough, believe me. Okay. So we have 4 levels that we could cycle through, and now we know how to do it with the number pad of the keyboard with the plus and minus keys. But there's a problem though. Where is the cage? Where's the wireframe cage that I need? Well, this is very easy to do. All you have to do is hold down the control key on the keyboard and hit the plus key that we were using just a moment ago on the number pad of the keyboard. When you hit the plus key while holding down control, the wireframe pops up, and there you go. It's the same way that we had set up the custom display properties in the previous video, only instead of wasting all that time setting up all the display properties and going over here to these menus and converting the object to subdivision, we just did it with the few presses of hotkeys on the keyboard. So it's a more advanced way of doing it, but really it's misleading because it's not so advanced. It's actually much easier and much better and faster to work this way. So during the duration of this tutorial and for the rest of this tutorial, the way that we're going to work with sub-Ds is exactly the way that I just showed you. We're going to hide and reveal the wireframe cage using control and the plus key on the number pad of your keyboard, and we're going to cycle the resolution levels up and down using the minus and the same plus key on the number pad of the keyboard. So keep those shortcuts in mind. They're really easy to remember. It's just 3 different keys to remember, and we're going to be using those from now on because it's faster and easier. So there we go. Okay, so now that we got that out of the way, let's look at the different components that make up this sub-D object. Alright, now before I continue, I want this to have a little bit more components because it is pretty low res right now. It's only a 6-sided cube. Even though it looks like a sphere, it's actually a sub-D cube. It'll make sense later on when you work with sub-Ds more. Okay, so how do I go ahead and add more resolution to this? Well, it's pretty simple. I'm going to hit Shift-D with the object selected, and Shift-D is the shortcut to subdivide in Xsi. And I get this PPG that pops up, and it asks me how many iterations I want to apply. Default is 1. Let me go ahead and apply 2. And now you can see I have a lot more lines crisscrossing this object, and it's subdividing it a lot more. You'll also notice it became more square-like as opposed to being round and circular and spherical. Well, I'm not going to explain that right now. We're going to get to that though later on in the tutorial, and you'll understand why this happens and how to control that behavior. And once you do, you'll pretty much unleash the power of sub-Ds and you'll be able to model pretty much anything in your imagination using sub-Ds. But right now we're going to stick with these basics because if you don't understand these basics, you really can't move on from here. So, what components make up this sub-D? Well, this sub-D is made up by 3 major components. points, also known as vertices, edges, and polygons. So those are the three components: points, edges, and polygons. Okay, so what are points? Points are literally the points or vertices where these white lines all meet up at. So for example, this spot right here has a point where all four of these edges meet up right in the center. And everywhere you see these edges connect, there's a point. Think of a point like a screw that holds boards together, that makes up the wall of a house or a ceiling or something like that. Now these edges connect those different points together, and in between the edges you have polygons, and these polygons are basically the surface of the object. Think of those as the wooden boards that go on the objects. Okay, so enough of that. Let's actually look and see how you can select these objects. The first way we're going to select objects is using one method in XSI, using the rectangular selection method, which is the most simplified method of selecting objects in XSI. So, how do we do that? If we go over here to the MCP, or the main command panel, under the select area, we have several different buttons here, and a few of these give us access to the edges, points, and polygons of this object. So with this object selected, if I click on this button that says point, you notice the object's wireframe turns to yellow, and now the points where all these edges meet are visible and they're blue. If I click on polygon, those points disappear because I don't want to see those points. I need to see polygons, and polygons are these areas in between the yellow edges, and I'll show you those in a moment. And then we have edge mode, and edge mode looks the same as polygon, with the difference being that we can select these yellow edges that run in between the polygons. So let's start off with point mode. I'm going to click on point, and here's our points. How do I select them? Very easy. Use the left mouse button, you can drag, and you can make an entire selection of these different points. Okay, so that's rectangular selection method. Now let's go over here and click on polygon, and if I do the same thing and drag a rectangle over here, I can select all the polygons that fall inside that rectangle. If I go ahead and rotate to behind the object, you'll notice that the polygons behind the object were also selected. That's very important to note, and I'm going to show you in a moment why that is. If we click on edge mode, we can go ahead and draw a rectangle and select all the edges of this object. And you also notice that when components are selected, they become highlighted in red, obviously, to let you know those are selected. Okay, so rectangular selection mode, which is the one that we're using right now, is used to select components in XSI. And basically how it works is the rectangle determines what you select. Anything outside the rectangle obviously doesn't get selected. Okay, but you also notice that when I do that, components behind the object get accidentally selected. Now sometimes you might want to do this on purpose, other times you may not want it. So what's the solution? XSI offers a great solution. It's called ray casting mode. In XSI, there's two modes to select components. The first one is the one we just saw, rectangular selection mode, and the second one is ray casting mode. So what's ray casting mode? Well, what better way to show you ray casting mode than to show you? What I'm going to do is I'm going to switch to ray casting mode with polygons, and I'm using a shortcut. I'll tell you all the shortcuts in a moment. I just want you to see this first. I'm going to click out here to deselect all of these polygons that I had selected earlier, and right now we have no polygons selected. When ray casting mode is active, you'll notice there's a small arrow icon underneath my mouse cursor. See, if I switch to regular rectangular selection mode, that little cursor underneath my mouse, it disappears. When I switch to ray casting mode, you'll see that little triangular icon appear, and that means that it is we're in ray casting mode right now. So what I can do with ray casting mode is left click, and you notice that selected polygons are highlighted in a bluish color. And then what I could do is left click and just drag my mouse while holding down the left mouse button, and any polygon that I touch becomes selected. As soon as I let go of my mouse button, you'll see that XSI will automatically select all the polygons that I had highlighted in blue. So now all these red ones are the ones that I have selected. You'll also notice something pretty neat. If I swing around behind the object, you'll notice that XSI did not select any of the components that were behind my area of visibility. This is an excellent way of selecting components without accidentally selecting components behind the object. So that's another way that ray casting mode differs from rectangular selection mode. So that's the second mode of selecting components in XSI. And we can do the same thing with edges, for example. If I switch to edge mode with ray casting, you can see that it works the same exact way. All I do is highlight and select all the edges I want, and bingo, there we go. And if I swing around to the back, you'll notice XSI intelligently did not select any of the components behind it, because in this case I didn't want it to. Okay, so now quickly let me show you some of the shortcuts for this, because it's very important. You can sit here and use this menu when you're first learning to use XSI. That's actually okay, and that's obviously going to be the best way to learn. However, once you start using XSI for a while, you really want to harness its speed and its efficiency. So you want to learn how to use the hotkey commands by using certain keys on the keyboard that activate tools quickly and easily without having to click on these buttons over here in this menu. Okay, so to select points, hit T on the keyboard, and now you can select points of this object, of this sub D object. When you want to select edges, just hit E on the keyboard, E for edges, and you can go ahead and rectangular select edges. When you want to select polygons using rectangular select, hit Y on the keyboard, and now you can drag a rectangle around the object and select all the polygons that you want. To use ray casting mode, use U on the keyboard to switch to ray casting mode for polygons, and now you can use ray casting mode and select the polygons that you need. To select edges in ray casting mode, hit I on the keyboard, and now you can use ray casting mode with edges. So it's a very useful feature in XSI and gives you a lot of power and speed. And it's much better to use the shortcuts on the keyboard, as you'll be moving a lot faster and shaving hours and hours of work time off of your overall project. Okay, so that's how you select the components, and those are the different components that make up a sub-D object in Softimage XSI. So now that you know what those are, we can move on to the next video and move on to more topics over sub-Ds.